Good evening, and welcome to another instalment of Quizical's Guide to with me, Qwizical. So today we're looking at a concept rather than more of a strategy, but it can be strategic. We're looking at the idea to challenge or not to challenge, as so William Shakespeare put himself, or so we like to think. So let's have a look at the example that I have of to challenge or not to challenge, and we'll get on with it. So here you can see that an invalid word has been played. We know it's invalid because it's clearly a transposition of the E and the I. But there's just one issue with this challenge. When you look at the player's next rack, and what we've always got to consider when challenging is whether it's worth keeping the play on the board or whether it's worth taking it off. Of course, most of the time, challenging off a phony word is the right thing to do because you don't want your opponent to get those points. You want them to basically score no points because the fewer points they score, the more easier you'll have a shot at winning, right? But in this particular example, the phony word that was played has a front hook. And as I showed you before, Kate was actually holding the correct letter for that front hook. So in this situation, it was probably best if she had held the play. So for those that aren't familiar with the concept of hold, it pauses and prevents your opponent from drawing tiles from the bag to give you time to think about what you want to do with the play. And this is all on your own time, and there's no limit to how long you can think about it. Just beware that your time is being used. So Kate's actual rack had an L on it, and L is the only front hook for this play. Now, of course, if she had left it on the board, of course she's a bonus behind and she needs to score about 50. But the difference is her opponent has already used the blank. And sometimes it's something you really need to consider because it's not often after your opponent bonuses that you're able to score 50 points on comeback really, really easily without really having to do too much. So in this case, she would have had mangle. So from the rack here, she'd have had mangle. I'm not sure why it keeps going ahead like that, but oh well. And mangle scores a considerable amount of points. And in this case, it was probably better to leave the phony on because she was scoring 66 points on comeback, and also her next play gave back Hatteria onto the triple. Now, another thing to always consider when you're challenging words off is that you now know part of or all of your opponent's rack. So if you do end up challenging it off, you're then able to plan quite accurately whether your next play is going to benefit them or not. Now, unfortunately in this case, she didn't realise that her play of lax would have actually benefited her opponent. But, you know, sometimes you just miss things. I know I've challenged words off in the past, and maybe I shouldn't have, and then given my opponent a better place to go. But really, it's all about having to think, and you need to stop and think. So to summarise what I've said, think about the play. What does it do for you? What does it do for your opponent? Make sure you've thought about it, because if you don't think about it, you may regret it pretty soon. And sometimes you need more time to think about that, so use hold. But also, while you've got the player on hold, you need to think about point 3, which says, what does the play do for you if you leave it on the board? Sometimes the play may give you the floater you need or the opening you need to play a specific word or get rid of a specific tile, and it's worth having a phony on the board if it really benefits you in the way. And to summarise, point number 4, plan what your opponent can do after your next play. And that's really important because you don't want to challenge a bonus off the board and then, realise that no playable bonus goes down, but you inadvertently give your opponent another opening for it. You just don't want to do that. So you need to make sure that you're not doing anything stupid the next turn. And this may involve sacrificing a lot of points to actually do this, to actually prevent your opponent from benefiting from what otherwise would have been your best play, but it's worth it when your opponent then can't play their words. So thank you for listening to this video about challenging. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed it, and stay tuned for the next installment.